In 2022, despite socioeconomic uncertainty and volatility, boards kept a firm focus on issues such as gender representation and sustainability. That is one of the main outcomes from the latest report from Heidrick Struggles, Board Monitor Europe 2023. Today my guest is Łukasz Kiniewicz, partner in charge in the Warsaw office on Heidrick Struggles. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Before we start, very interesting topics, how board members can manage in such a difficult and challenging times. Please briefly introduce yourself and the company.
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a pleasure to manage our operations in Poland, and we are also covering Central Eastern Europe. I have over 23 years of professional experience. My prior background is basically management consulting, and I've also been an entrepreneur, running my own tech companies for many years, and I've been a headhunter now for 8 years. And I joined Heidrick 1 year ago, and now I have a pleasure to be building the company in this part of Europe.
And Heidrick itself, the company, because...
Yes, Heidrick is still not very well known in Poland, but actually it was founded in 1953. So we've been on the market for 70 years. So it's a very well established company, very well known in the US and Western Europe. We are perceived as a golden standard in executive search. We are listed on NASDAQ. Mm-hmm. And basically, we are a global leadership advisory firm. We provide executive search, basically recruitment on top-level positions. We recruit CEOs, board members, top directors in both multinational companies and also local players, and we also have consulting part where we do all kind of leadership assessment and team acceleration projects. And just recently we acquired a company called Atrius in Germany, and based on that we are and BTG based on those two companies which we acquired, we are building on-demand talent solutions, which means basically interim directors. Mm-hmm. We help companies to solve some, let's say, interim management issues.
And do you focus on some particular sectors, or it's more sectors?
All possible sectors. So we are very strong in tech, and this is also the sector that I'm leading in mm-hmm. In this part of Europe. But also, of course, financial services, industrial, consumer, and retail. So basically, we cover all major sectors of the economy.
Interesting, because I would say that tech is now a part of every business, so
absolutely.
Maybe we'll come back to this in our discussion, but let's come back to the Board Monitor Europe 2023 that I mentioned in the introduction. What's the background of the research, and what are the main takeaways?
So this is a report that we've been running for many years globally. So we look at the top companies which are listed on exchanges across the world. And this year, for the first time, we have the pleasure to include Poland in the results. So we are quite happy with that. So basically, we have the possibility to compare the data between the years, and we see some dynamics on the market. So in terms of board appointments, we see that the number of the appointments is similar compared to the previous year. It's approximately 500 people if we look at Europe, and we take into consideration 14 major markets. However, what's interesting, what we saw in the last edition of the report, is that the share of women increased from 44% to 49% mm-hmm. across Europe. So basically, almost half of the board population are women, which is absolutely great in terms of diversity. And there was also a significant increase of the directors under 50 years old, so from 16% to 24%. So we also see some new blood and some younger people being appointed at the boards, which is a very significant difference compared to the previous years. And also we see an increasing share of first-time directors from 36 to 39%. So meaning that the boards and the owners of the companies allow people to take their chance to join the board for the first time, mm-hmm. which is super important.
And what does these results, tell us about the business shape, the market in general? Does it say that we are living in such a challenging times that we need, as you mentioned, fresh blood because of the new skills, different perspectives? How would you define those data?
Yeah, absolutely. The business reality is really challenging these days. Companies across Europe have been under extraordinary pressure, especially after COVID pandemic and improving their operations. And then the war in Ukraine happened, which is a very tragic event. And we are very close to it, being in Poland. So basically, we see that many companies are actually struggling, and we also see a little bit of an economic slowdown across the region. But I can see that despite those circumstances, European companies have kept firm focus on gender representation and sustainability, which is a very important topic. And also some of the EU regulations help us, as in November 22, EU Parliament approved a new set of regulations for the companies hiring more than 250 people, that they will have to allocate a minimum of 40% for non-executive director roles to the underrepresented gender. So basically, I can see that many companies have this kind of, let's say, own agenda to increase diversity at the boards, but also there is some, let's say, formal and government regulations that will help.
We'll come back to ESG because obviously that's on the agenda of most of the companies. Even if they are not directly affected by those regulations, they will be anyway because they are in the supply and in the value chain. So that's how it will roll out. But I would like to also ask you, because you mentioned that the research was conducted in many different countries for the first time in Poland. What are the differences, the major differences between the markets, and how does Poland stand in the general map of the countries you were measuring?
Yes, what was very interesting looking at the results for Poland is that we found Poland in a group of countries with the highest score of first-time non-executive directors. It's together with Spain and Portugal, which was quite an interesting result. Unfortunately, compared to other countries, Poland has the lowest gender representation at the boards. It's only 25% of non-executive directors are women. And when we look at other markets, some of the countries can actually say that they have almost 60% of women sitting on boards. So this is definitely something that we should work on. Also, what we observe in other European countries, the boards tend to be more international, but this is all, I think, something that we are a pretty homogeneous nation. So I would say the percentage of expats in the Polish boards is significantly lower than in other countries.
But it wasn't like this long time ago in the 90s
exactly.
when all those multinationals started in Poland. But it's actually very interesting what will happen in the future, because now talking about the diversity, that's also in terms of, the backgrounds, ethics, countries of the origin, it also makes this perspective being more sensitive to different perspective if you also have the boards which are diverse also in terms of the cultural background, yes?
Absolutely.
But yes, I would like to come back to these few points that you mentioned, because for example, you said that in Poland it's about higher a percentage for the first time board members. Does it mean that the situation requires new people, or is it about the promotions, or what's the conclusion about this data? I
think there are different factors. Some of them, when we look at the largest enterprises, were political nominations that we have also take into consideration, but in many of the companies we can see that the succession is becoming a process. So actually companies are actively thinking about how to promote new people, how to let the younger generation of directors grow and be promoted to the board. So I would say it's a combination of different factors.
Okay, ESG mentioned several times in our discussion, so we need to talk about this. Do you think that the study that you presented are in line with the ESG requirements, and actually they show the real commitment of those companies that they want to face ESG criteria and follow the strategy?
Yeah, actually, this is very interesting because I would say that ESG and sustainability is like an omnipresent topic in business conversations across the boards, and everyone is talking about it. There is, when you go to any conference, there is always the ESG agenda. But actually, as an executive search company, we don't see too many senior appointments in that space. So my hypothesis would be that many people talk about it and think about it, but then there's not too much action going on. And especially to have the mandate in the organization to place a person who would run the whole ESG agenda. But I think that this will change. So there is a lot of awareness on the market that this is such an important topic. And the type of appointments, senior appointments that we do on the market is usually a very good indication of what is happening. So if the companies come to us to look for, new CFOs or new CEOs, we know that there's a certain trend on the market. We can, let's say, estimate where there is a potential crisis or a growth or some other agenda. And in this case, there are not too many ESG-related board positions right now, at least in our region. We also conducted another study with BCG and INSEAD across the globe, and we asked the global boards about the knowledge of the ESG and the agenda, and actually only 29% of the board members could completely agree that the board has sufficient knowledge to challenge the ESG topics. So it's not only a regional thing, but I'm pretty sure that also globally there is still a lot to be developed. I think we are.
But this research also referred to the stock exchange companies, or
no? This was
broader.
This was a broader, different research, specifically addressing the ESG topic.
Okay.
But I think the good news is that we are getting there. So I can see that slowly the companies are thinking about addressing this topic very actively, and I believe that at some point there will be appointed leaders who would be focusing on this area 100%.
Yeah, because actually those regulations will start to. They will be implemented 2024, so it's quite close perspective. And also
Absolutely.
To be able to report, you need to set up the processes that actually support gathering the data and so on. So maybe it's also the fact that we are still waiting in many areas on the proper factors and indicators, how to measure environment, which is probably the most advanced, but how to measure social impact, which is absolutely a challenge, I think, for everyone. And of course, the governance and transparency and so on. Well, this is very interesting. So hopefully with the next studies, we'll be able to develop this thinking, and we'll see where we are.
Yes.
But you started the topic also with the successions on the... And I'm wondering, because of course, obviously we agree that these times require quite flexible, and we talk about this agile style of management. And do you think that nowadays it's more difficult to find the proper management board when actually it's really hard even to anticipate the future? Is it a challenge? Any tips how to approach this?
Yes, it's always very difficult for many reasons. But I would say that the positive thing that we see on the market is that succession is becoming actually a planned process, not a one-time exercise. And we observe that, especially among mature organizations, this is on very high on the agenda of the boards, to make sure that there is a continuation of thought leadership and management at key positions. What we also observed is that at mature boards, it's not only about the current competency gaps across the boards, but also people are thinking and anticipating what would be needed in the future and what kind of skills and experience would be relevant in several years. So the succession process also takes into consideration planning, which is absolutely great. Also, when we look at our study, and we mentioned several times the younger directors under 50, well, this is actually happening. So the good news is that younger generation of directors is taking over. So we can see that the succession is ongoing. And we see this happening across Europe, and Poland is definitely among those countries. So this is a very positive sign.
Well, very interesting data. I would say that on one hand, actually, it's probably very positive that we have more young blood that brings the oxygen to the business environment and probably has different perspective toward the future. And of course, I've met many opinions that yes, let's leave it to the younger people. It's for them. Actually, we are talking about the future for them. But at the same time, we also have aging, demographic issues, and so on, and probably labor market will be expanded also in terms of how old are people on the labor market and so on. So probably the word that will stay for us for longer is diversity, which not only means gender but also age and culture.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for the discussion, and let's meet when you will have another study to see where the companies are with their ESG progress.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you.